Hi, everybody. Saturday night, and I think it's time we had a Brexit update. So there are going to be two parts to this. For those of you who like politics, and then for those of you who also like the prediction side, I'm going to talk about all the options as we are now looking forward to when Parliament goes back in September and waiting to see if there's going to be this big no confidence vote, and if some sort of coup is going to happen, where they are going to install basically a Remainer government, which is what it is. It's not a government of national unity. It's going to be a Remainer government, let's be honest. So is that going to happen? So I'm going to look at all the options. Then I'm going to do my predictions at the end. And also, this is going to be connected to a vlog I'm doing on Ken Clark and Joe Swinson, because I did have a look at Joe Swinson's chart. Don't usually look at the charts of the leaders of the Liberal Democrats because they don't seem to be a major party, but her chart was a lot more interesting and revealing than you would have expected. So definitely going to have a look at that. So I'd like to start by just reading this quote by Malcolm Rifkind. So he says, "It is a convention and not part of any act that the government has to resign if defeated in a confidence vote, and that a general election is the ultimate way in which a constitutional crisis can be resolved. It's also the case that the Supreme Court cannot enforce respect for conventions that are not incorporated into an act of Parliament." So if Boris Johnson, if there is a vote of no confidence, first of all, he does have 2 weeks to try and restore confidence and try and win a second vote. So there's a 2-week period anyway. But even should he not win a second confidence vote, it's only a convention that he has to step down and an election has to be called. It cannot be enforced by the Supreme Court. So in order for the Parliament to force him to step down, they'd have to pass an act of Parliament. This all would have to be tabled. It would all eat into the time running up to the deadline on the 31st of October. So in law, there's absolutely nothing forcing Boris to stand aside or to call a general election at that point. So that is something the Remainers are up against. Hey, hi, Lovidosa, welcome. Hi. So there you go. So that's one hurdle they have to get over. The next thing, it is, however, also only a convention and not law that the Queen can act only on advice of her ministers. It's only a convention that the Queen cannot dismiss her Prime Minister, even if he is flouting the Constitution. If the Prime Minister refused to respect the normal consequences of losing a confidence vote, and he sought to prevent both Parliament and the electorate having a final say on no deal, he would create the gravest constitutional crisis since the actions of Charles I led to the Civil War. So says Malcolm Rifkind. He goes on to say, "I have great confidence that the Prime Minister will ignore the advice of Dominic Cummings. King Charles lost his head by flouting the Constitution. Mr. Johnson will wish to keep his, while some around him are clearly losing theirs." So what they're trying to say there is that the Queen could elect not to act on the advice of her ministers and could choose to dismiss her Prime Minister. Now, the Queen never acts alone. She would be acting there on advice from maybe the Privy Council, who are full of Remainers and common purpose people. And of course, maybe they could twist her arms to dismiss Boris Johnson. So there's a few things at play there. I actually had a look at the chart of the UK at the time King Charles lost his head and there was a civil war. And interestingly enough, there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Gemini squaring up, or opposing at least, a Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Sagittarius. So this time, we know in January, we do have another Saturn-Pluto conjunction, even though this time it is in Capricorn. And this time, it isn't opposing the Neptune-Pluto conjunction, but it's right very close on the Neptune-Uranus conjunction of 1993. So there is almost a link in terms of the two conjunctions are not concurrently opposing each other, but they are conjunct each other in the two different time spans. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happening will be conjunct the most recent Uranus-Neptune conjunction. So there are quite a few similarities, but I think in general, definitely nothing on the scale of King Charles I. Well, I guess that's debatable because there is a big rift between the country. And I think there is a civil war going on, really, isn't there? Except it's a political, social, and opinion civil war at the moment. Okay, let's look at kind of the other things that some people have been saying about this government of national unity, #Ramona government. Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan says, "Hi, Lisa. I think Boris should just call an election, regardless of what these Ramonas are trying to do. Whatever they're trying to do to Brexit means, yeah." Okay, Jonathan, what I think is going to happen is Boris doesn't know he can't really predict what the other side are going to do. I don't think they're going to get their act together. But look, he doesn't know that. So he might feel that his best way of staying in control of this process and not losing control altogether is not to leave, is to ask for a small extension, because I really don't think we are going to leave on the 31st of October. I think there will be a general election before that. And so I think we will leave, and we'll leave properly, but not then. Okay. So let's have a look. We had John MacDonald, who went up to Scotland, and he was like trying to cozy up to Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP, saying that, you know, if they support Labour in taking over in this coup, that they'll allow Scotland to have a second referendum. But that went down like a lead balloon with Labour Scotland, because Labour Scotland's only point of difference really to the SNP is that Labour Scotland are pro the union of the UK, and they don't want Scotland to split. So if they feel the Westminster Labour Party is on the side of the SNP, then that really puts them on a sticky wicket, Scottish Labour. And they're having a difficult time as it is, because they've got the Tories encroaching, the Lib Dems encroaching, and a big threat from the SNP. So that could wipe them out. However, Tom Watson was quick to come and disagree with John MacDonald. And this just shows you there's no way Labour are going to be able to coordinate this government of national unity, because they're not united within them. As many times as you can hear from Labour, they've always got a different opinion. And, old Jeremy Corbyn has become such a toxic figure. Then, of course, we had Chuka Umunna, and he came out and he said Labour MPs would block Jezza from becoming Prime Minister, because within the Labour Party we have all the Remainers. They're far more closely aligned to Joe Swinson and Liberal Democrats. They really don't want to see Jeremy Corbyn with power, because even though he's saying to everyone, well, it'll be a sort of transitional government or a holding government with a short time limit, you know, once he's ensconced and all his really far left ministers are ensconced, is he really going to want to say, okay, you know, let's call a general election? Because then it could all be over, couldn't it? So once he's in there, will they get rid of him? And I think a lot of people would be very scared to jump like that and support him, knowing that they might not be able to get rid of him. So obviously what John MacDonald is saying to Scotland, they both hate the UK. Nicola Sturgeon doesn't like the UK. John MacDonald is intrinsically anti the UK. So of course it's in his interests to, you know, have Scotland split off. What's been really interesting about this is what big fans of the monarchy The Guardian has become. They're almost rooting for the Queen to sort of step in, stop the process, use the powers that I was just talking about that she has via the Privy Council to oust Boris Johnson, should he decide to take Dominic Cummings' advice and just not resign. So generally, The Guardian now, big fans of the monarchy, hey? They're also big fans of them because they love the wokeness of Harry and Meghan. So it just shows that Guardian are not really libertarians who pro-democracy. They really love authoritarian, anti-democratic institutions like the monarchy, as long as they perceive the monarchy being woke and right in tune with issues that they care about. So it just shows you how sort of two-faced The Guardian are on that issue. Very interesting was the talk this week of, will Sinn Féin take up their seats? For people who are watching in other countries, Sinn Féin are absolutely opposed to taking up their seats, even though they win seats in Northern Ireland and could take up their seats as MPs in the UK Parliament. They never do it because they have this long-standing beef with the UK. But they are saying they might, so that they would have a vote in order to get rid of Boris Johnson. However, other people were saying that some of the Sinn Féin MPs might resign, not stand in by-elections, so that Remainer MPs from Labour could be elected. And I think that's probably one of the most stupid, ill-thought-out theories, because first of all, they have to trigger the by-election, run a whole campaign. This is going to eat into time in which every day it's ticking down to the supposed deadline. So I can't see that happening. Why would Sinn Féin want to give up their seats? Because once the Labour person is ensconced in those seats, they might just stick there, and then Sinn Féin are out of it altogether. I also think that from Sinn Féin's point of view, and also from the SNP, they actually could work in their favour to have a no deal. How many times have we been told a no deal would risk the breakup of the UK? That's exactly what Nicola Sturgeon want and what Sinn Féin want. So for Sinn Féin, it might be win-win. They think, hey, let's just sit this out. If it goes no deal, we win, because it gives us added leverage in pushing for a united Ireland. So why should we get involved? So I really can't see that Sinn Féin is going to be the factor that is going to determine anything here. So I'm thinking as well that, why would, if Jeremy Corbyn does start leading a, what would you call it, a transitional government, it's going to be incredibly unstable. There could be another vote of no confidence. And what would happen then going into a general election? How the MPs behave now is going to all influence what happens to their seats in the general election. They've all got the Brexit Party breathing down their neck, especially as I'm sure the Brexit Party will be standing against Labour Remainers in all those seats in the north of England and northwest and Birmingham, which is strongly Leave. So they've always think a little bit ahead. What do they do now? Will they lose their seats come a general election? And that, I think, will weigh heavy. And that's why I think there's so many factors. There's party allegiances. People also looking forward now beyond Brexit, and where they will stand, how powerful their party will stand. And that's why it won't be too easy for them to agree anything now. And that's why basically I don't think this is going to happen. I think all the opposing forces are too disunited. No one wants to, a lot of people don't want to stand with Jeremy Corbyn. And when I do my chart on Jo Swinson, I'm going to be talking about how she is almost a closet Tory Remainer. She is diametrically opposed, as when you look back at her voting record, to all the things that Corbyn does. So I don't see that she is going to want to land up in any form of arrangement with him, because she is totally opposed to many of his views. Also, how does Jeremy Corbyn really feel? We know that he actually wants Brexit. So I don't know, so he's also conflicted on this. There's just too many opposing forces, and I don't think they're going to get it right. Just to cast our eye over to what's going on in Europe, German bond yields are now at the same level they were just before the crash in 2008. Very interesting. More signs of a big recession and a big breakdown in the banking industry coming for Europe. What Europe also did is, in their trade deal with Japan, usually with Canada, 7 years, they were haggling over everything. They pushed through the trade deal with Japan extremely quickly. Part of the reason was, I think, to spite the UK, so they could sort of get in there with Japan first. But what this has also done is caused a huge amount of competition for their car industry, and that's also damaging. Exports from the entire Eurozone are down almost 3%. Exports from the UK are up almost 11%. So we're doing an awful lot better than they are doing out of this. So they really have to, play their cards close, play their cards a little bit more carefully than they have been doing. Okay, right. What I do see happening in the UK, so here is my prediction of what I think is going to happen. I don't think we're going to end up leaving on the 31st, and I did say that before. But I also don't think it's going to be because they are going to install the so-called government of national unity, because I don't see them getting their act together. However, the mere threat of it may cause Boris to take a step back and decide that perhaps we should ask for a little extension and arrange a general election, because I do think that Boris would be confident that he can win it, and I think he can win it. The next thing is, it is also possible that Europe will blink. What if we really got to the 30th and it looked like we were going to go into no deal? Perhaps it would be Europe who'd say, okay, guys, let's just think about this again. And they would blink first. So either way, I don't think we will leave on that day. And I think there'll be a general election now, either in November or January. But I think it's going to be January. I was hearing on LBC that they say they don't like in the UK to do elections in the winter, in the dark nights, because people just don't bother to come out and vote. And I think November would be a terrible time to do it, because people are beginning to become preoccupied with Christmas. Most people in their businesses are very much more busy catering to things before Christmas, or trying to get everything wrapped up before Christmas. The weather's changed, it's cold, no one's going to vote. Yeah, sure. In January, it's also cold and miserable and people aren't going to vote. But at least you've got Christmas out of the way and you can focus people's minds. So I think there are a lot of reasons why they wouldn't want to have it in late November. And you're going to have at least 6 weeks for the campaign. And the campaign is going to be quite grueling. I don't think they're going to want to have it late November or early December, just because of the Christmas factor and because voters might come out. Very low turnout. It's just far too unpredictable. That's why I do think it'll be in January. And the other thing, I think, is when we do have the general election, I think the Tories will win and Boris will come out on top. But I also think the Lib Dems are going to do very, very well. We could land up with Jo Swinson as leader of the opposition. And the odds on that are currently 7-1, if you want to think about that. I also think that the Liberal Democrats are going to now start getting defections en masse from Labour Remainers and from Tory Remainers. It's going to become the centrist party, because I think a lot of people in Labour are itching to move away from the far left of Jeremy Corbyn. So we could end up with a kind of centrist Lib Dem party, a more far right or to the right Tory party led by Boris Johnson with his kind of right-wing Brexiteer cabinet. And on the other side, we have the far left Labour. So I do think the Liberal Democrats could move into a much stronger position. And then, of course, we've also got the influence of Ken Clarke, who's, his chart is looking very, very strong. So I see him and Joe Swimson in the next few months becoming the spearheads who are going to be trying to bring together this government of national unity. They've got a lot of money behind them. They've got a lot of clout behind them. So Jeremy Corbyn's definitely going to be sidelined. I said for a long time in his chart, he's waning in influence. He'll be sidelined. It'll be Ken Clarke, Joe Swimson to the fore for the Remain spearhead. Brexiteers will remain united behind Boris. Farage, it'll remain to be seen how much he plays ball in a referendum, in a general election. So that's kind of in general what I see going on. Catalina Gurdon, please put on some subs, but like subtitles. Okay, I'm not sure how that works. You'll have to give me a little note on that. Okay, so that's how I see it all going. And yeah, so as I say, I'm also going to be doing a little vlog on Joe Swinson and Ken Clarke, which is kind of related in to this general question about the how this is all going. The one thing I want to add on is on the 31st of October, and in the chart of the UK and in the chart of Boris Johnson, I see the UK's hands being strengthened in terms of going forward in our negotiations with the EU or in just dealing with them in general. And I also see Boris Johnson's hand is going to be strengthened around the 31st. So it seems that whatever Boris does, he's going to play it just right, and he will come out on the 31st stronger, and the UK will also come out on the 31st in a lot stronger bargaining position. Although I don't think it means we actually going to leave, but we will reach a decisive new point in the negotiation and then head into a general election in, I think, probably more likely January, in which this will all be settled and there'll be a big shake-up in terms of seats in Parliament, and we'll move towards leaving probably April time, which is pretty much what I said before. Jonathan, could Boris Johnson not have an election while the UK will leave the EU without a deal in the middle of a general election? Oh, do you mean like a kind of referendum? Well, that might be a bit complicated. I don't think they like to complicate things that much. But I think basically, if Boris gets a strong mandate in terms of winning an election, he can do whatever he wants, and he will be able to take us out without a deal. I believe Gerald Batten wrote a book, and he said repeatedly that that's the way the EU works. You can't negotiate while you're still bound in by Article 50. You have to actually leave, and to show them you mean business, and then you can probably negotiate a much better trade deal with them. And he's always said that that's the only way to do it. Right, guys, just a little subject. I'll put this on here rather than starting a separate stream. Do you remember when I did my vlog about Notre Dame, and I talked about the poisoning factor in the French chart, and I also talked about the tons of lead that were incinerated and had gone out into the atmosphere around Paris? Well, I noticed on Sky News that they finally clicked. Now, if they'd been opened their eyes, they would have clicked on this a long time ago, but they finally clicked to the danger of lead poisoning, and there is a massive cleanup going on in France, all in the area of Notre Dame. It was sparked by a child at a school becoming ill from lead poisoning. Apparently the school is near Notre Dame, and it's absolutely covered in lead. Unfortunately, lead poisoning is usually much more of a long-term thing where people wouldn't notice immediately, but look how long they've let that drift before they've decided to have the cleanup. I mean, where were all these scientists? Where were all the boffins? I mean, I'd managed to work that out myself, sitting in my kitchen. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but eventually they've decided a cleanup will be in place. Trump will help Boris. Yes, Trump definitely is. He's putting a lot of pressure on Europe. And I think, obviously, Boris is taking a lot of advice from Trump, because you can see clearly so many of Boris's actions are much more Trumpian, especially in the way he's become unapologetic. He says things, he isn't afraid to be controversial. I think that he knows that's how you win people over. You've got to say what people are thinking, say what other people are too scared to say, and that's why people get to like you. Yeah, so I think, Boris is definitely going to deliver, but it's going to be, it's going to be a roller coaster time. As I say, there are some analogies between Charles I and the Civil War and whatnot, to now, not as strong, but they're certainly there as well. So this is a mammoth time, especially going into the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Right, guys, I was asked by one of my subscribers if I would do a chart on Jeffrey Epstein, and would I answer the question, is he dead? And so, since I love a challenge, I'm definitely going to take that one up. So that's kind of a mixture of astrology and lots of factual things. I always like to do it that way, because some of you guys watch me because you like the political chat and are not that interested in astrology, and others of you are interested in both. Okay, see you soon.